There's a mom in every group chat who never seems to panic about money. She's not the one posting the new kitchen renovation or the Disney trip countdown. She's the one who shows up to the potluck with something simple and homemade, whose kids wear hand-me-downs without anyone feeling sorry for them, and who, when the school fundraiser envelope comes home for the third time that month, just quietly writes the check without the stress spiral the rest of us have in the car afterward. For a long time, I genuinely thought moms like that either made more money than me, married better, or were just wired different, some calm gene the rest of us missed out on. Then I actually started paying attention, really watching. And it wasn't income, it wasn't luck. It was a set of small, almost boring habits, repeated so consistently they'd become invisible the way brushing your teeth is invisible. A lot of these habits, once I started digging into where they came from, trace straight back to Japan, a culture that has spent generations being quietly, unglamorously disciplined about money, where just enough is considered a compliment instead of an insult, and where there's no cultural pressure to perform wealth you don't have. I'm a Laura, mom of 2, and I want to be honest with you. I have absolutely lost sleep doing math in a parking lot, trying to figure out if we could afford the school trip fee without touching the grocery budget. I have felt that specific shame of hoping a card doesn't decline in front of the cashier. I'm not telling you this from some place of already having it figured out perfectly. I'm telling you this because I found 12 specific things that moved me from that parking lot version of myself to something calmer, and none of them required a raise. I'm not rich. I've just stopped being scared. And it turns out that feels a lot like being rich. So let's steal from a culture that's been doing this longer than any of us have owned a budgeting app. None of what's coming needs a bigger income, a side hustle, or some dramatic life overhaul. It just needs a Tuesday and about 20 minutes of your attention right now. Let's go through all 12 one at a time, and I'll tell you exactly how each one showed up in my own house, numbers included. Habit 1. Kakeibo, the household ledger. Kakeibo literally translates to household finance ledger, and it's a practice that's over 100 years old in Japan. Long before personal finance apps existed, women were sitting down once a month with a plain notebook and doing this by hand. Not tracking spending after the fact, the way most of us do when we glance at a banking app and wince. Doing it before the money moves, on paper, in pen, answering 4 questions. How much do I have? How much do I want to save? How much am I actually going to spend? And how do I want to improve this month compared to last? Picture a kitchen table after the kids are asleep. A plain notebook, nothing fancy, a cup of coffee slowly going cold while someone writes, groceries $84 in pen, before she's bought a single item, not after. That order matters more than it sounds like it should. When you write a number down before you spend it, it becomes a decision. When you glance at a number after you've already spent it, it becomes a confession. Here's where most people get this wrong when they hear budgeting. They think it means restriction, spreadsheets, guilt. Kakeibo isn't that. It's slower and more forgiving than that. It's 4 honest questions once a month on paper. I started doing a version of this on Sunday night specifically. 1 page, 4 columns, no app, just a $3 notebook from the drugstore that I keep in the same kitchen drawer as the takeout menus. The very first month I did it, I found $140 a month in subscriptions I had completely forgotten I was paying for. A meal kit I hadn't used in 4 months. A kids app I'd forgotten to cancel. A streaming service my husband thought I was paying for and I thought he was paying for. None of that showed up because of some fancy audit. It showed up because I had to write every line item down by hand and actually look at it. Try this for 1 week. Before Monday, take 1 page and write down what you have, what you want to save, and what you're allowed to spend. On paper, by hand, not typed. It feels almost too simple to actually work. It works anyway, and it sets up almost everything else on this list. Habit 2, Mottainai, the too good to waste reflex. Mottainai is a word that doesn't have a clean English translation, but the closest is a small pang of regret. The feeling you're supposed to get when something still useful gets thrown away before it's actually done being useful. A scrap of fabric, the last spoonful of rice stuck to the pot, a toy with a little bit of life left in it. It's not hoarding, and it's not about guilt-tripping yourself into keeping clutter. It's a reflex, trained over time, that quietly asks, does this still have value, or am I just done looking at it? Picture a mom scraping the very last bit of peanut butter out of the jar with a spatula instead of tossing it straight in the trash, because in her head that's not scraps clinging to plastic. That's still food, and food that's still food doesn't get thrown away. It sounds like a tiny, almost irrelevant example. That's exactly the point. Mottainai lives entirely in the tiny, irrelevant-seeming moments, which is exactly why most people never notice how much money leaks out through them. In our house, Mottainai turned into an actual rule around school supplies of all things. Half-used notebooks from June don't get thrown out and replaced in August. They get used first, cover taped up if it's torn, and only replaced once they're genuinely finished. Half a bottle of glue doesn't get replaced because a new bottle looked cute at the store. It gets used until it's empty. It sounds almost silly written out loud like this, and yet when I actually sat down and calculated what a family of 4 wastes in a year on barely used items that got replaced purely out of convenience rather than actual need, it came out to close to $300. Money that had simply evaporated into things sitting half-used in a drawer somewhere. This week, before you toss or replace anything at all, food, supplies, anything half-empty, pause and ask the Mottainai question first. Is this actually done being useful, or am I just a little bored of it? That pause alone will save you more than you'd expect. Habit 3. Bento discipline, planning meals a week ahead. The Japanese bento box tradition isn't really about the box itself, the cute compartments, the carefully arranged rice. Underneath the aesthetic is a discipline. A mom sits down once a week, decides every single lunch and dinner in advance, shops once against that exact list, and then the entire week runs on rails instead of on impulse. There's no 5 p.m. What do we even have in this house? Panic. No $40 drive-through run, purely because nobody made a decision 3 hours earlier, when everyone had the energy to think clearly. Picture Sunday afternoon, 1 piece of paper on the counter, 7 dinners written down in 15 minutes flat before a single ingredient has even been purchased. That 15 minutes is doing an enormous amount of invisible work for the rest of the week. The principle underneath this one is decision fatigue, and it's more expensive than people realize. Every single what's for dinner moment that hits you at 5:45 p.m., tired with a hungry kid pulling on your leg, tends to resolve itself through whichever app is fastest to open. It's not that you don't know how to cook. It's that decision-making at 5:45 p.m. on empty is a completely different skill than decision-making on a calm Sunday afternoon with coffee in hand. I started doing one 20-minute planning session every single Sunday, and it single-handedly cut our takeout spending by more than half. Not because takeout got banned, but because the decision had already been made 3 days earlier, while I actually had the mental bandwidth to make a good one. Try this for the next 7 days. 1 sheet of paper, every dinner written down before Monday morning, groceries bought once against that list, and nothing else. Let the version of you with energy make the decision for the version of you who's running on fumes by Wednesday. Habit 4. Gaman. Sitting with the urge. Gaman roughly means quiet, patient endurance. The discipline of sitting with discomfort instead of immediately reaching to fix it. It shows up everywhere in Japanese culture, from enduring a long commute without complaint to waiting out a difficult season of life without demanding it end early. Applied to money, it becomes something very specific. Feeling the urge to buy something and simply not acting on it yet, on purpose, treating the waiting itself as a kind of quiet strength rather than a punishment. Picture standing in a checkout line, phone in hand, thumb hovering right over the Buy Now button on something you don't actually need. And instead of tapping it or resisting it with white-knuckled willpower, you just put the phone away. Not a forever no, just a not yet. Here's the part most people get wrong about impulse control. They think it's about willpower, gritting your teeth and refusing. Gaman isn't that exhausting. It's just a delay built into the process on purpose that lets the urge do what urges naturally do. Fade, mostly on their own, if you give them a little time. I made a specific rule for myself around anything under $50 that isn't a necessity. The candle, the cute mug, the random thing in the dollar section that catches my eye while I'm actually there for diapers. I make myself wait until I get home and sleep on it once before deciding. About half of those urges are completely gone by the next morning. I genuinely can't remember what the thing even was. The other half I buy without an ounce of guilt because they survive the wait, which tells me they weren't impulse at all. This week, any small unplanned purchase under $50, make yourself leave the store or close the tab before deciding. Sleep on it once. That's the entire habit, and it costs you nothing but a few hours. Habit 5. Ikigai. Spending. Let your why approve the purchase. Ikigai means your reason for being, the overlap of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs from you, and, in some versions of the concept, what you can be compensated for. It's become a bit of a buzzword outside Japan, but the original idea is simpler and more useful than the version that gets printed on posters. A life organized around a clear sense of purpose tends to need less external stuff to feel complete. As a spending filter, Ikigai becomes a simple gut check question. Does this purchase actually serve the life I am trying to build, or is it just noise filling a gap? Picture two moms with the exact same household income. One's money quietly disappears into things she genuinely can't remember buying by the time Friday rolls around. She couldn't list them if you asked her. The other spends very deliberately on a short list of specific things. Piano lessons, a slightly better stroller she actually uses every single day, one real family trip a year, and cuts almost everything else without feeling deprived at all, because every dollar she spends is tied to something she actually specifically cares about. I started asking one question before any non-essential purchase over about $30. Does this serve what I actually want our life to look like, or did I just see it somewhere and want it for a second? It has cut my random, forgettable spending more than any single budget category or spreadsheet rule I've ever tried, because it isn't a restriction, it's a why. This week, before any non-essential purchase, ask it out loud. Actually say the words, does this serve my why? Or is it just a moment of boredom shopping? You'll be surprised how often you already know the answer before you finish asking. Habit 6. Danshari. The 3-question declutter. Danshari is built from 3 characters that roughly translate to refuse, dispose, and separate. A philosophy that started as a decluttering method and turns out to double as one of the most effective spending filters there is. Refuse the things you don't need coming in. Dispose of what you no longer use. Separate yourself from the belief that having more automatically means being more secure. Picture opening a closet where every single thing left inside actually earns its place. Nothing crammed in out of guilt, nothing kept just in case for a case that never comes. Every time I run this 3-question filter on a category in our house, the kids' toy bins, my own closet, the pantry shelf that somehow always has 3 jars of the same spice, I find things we bought new that we already owned 2 of, buried under everything else. That's not clutter, that's real money, sitting there, duplicated, forgotten. The deeper principle here is that clutter is really just delayed regret wearing a disguise. Every unused item sitting in your house is a receipt for a decision you'd probably make differently today. Danshari uses that slightly uncomfortable realization as fuel for buying less going forward, rather than as an excuse to buy organizing bins to hide the problem better. Before you buy anything new this week, do a 60-second Danshari check on the space it's actually going into. Ask the 3 questions. Do I need to refuse this? Is there something I should dispose of to make room? Am I buying this from need or from the belief that more equals safer? Half the time, you'll discover you already own something that does the exact job. If any of this is landing so far, this is a good moment to hit subscribe. I put out a calm, no-shame money video like this every single week for moms who are genuinely tired of being told the whole problem is their coffee order. Okay, let's keep going, because the next stretch might be my favorite part of this entire list. Habit 7. Wabi Sabi. Falling in love with imperfect things. Wabi Sabi is the appreciation of beauty in things that are imperfect, aged, or incomplete. A chipped teacup still in daily use, a faded quilt, a secondhand coat that already has a story stitched into it before you ever put it on. It sits directly opposite the instinct our culture trains into us from childhood, that everything worth having has to arrive shiny, boxed, and brand new to actually count. Picture a thrifted dresser with one slightly mismatched drawer pull, sanded down and repainted over a weekend, sitting in a kid's room and somehow looking more charming, more specific, more theirs than anything pulled straight off a big box shelf ever could. That mismatch isn't a flaw to apologize for. It's character, and it cost a fraction of new. I started actively choosing secondhand first for anything that wasn't going to be used daily by a toddler with questionable judgment about markers. Furniture, my own clothes, anything kids would outgrow in 6 months anyway. I stopped treating secondhand as the backup plan for when we couldn't afford new, and started treating it as the smarter first option, full stop. One dresser, one coat, one bookshelf at a time, that shift added up to just over $600 saved in a single year on things that, if I'm honest, look better with a little wear on them than they would fresh out of a box. This week, before buying one non-essential item new, check a thrift store, a local marketplace app, or even just a friend's hand-me-down pile first. Give the imperfect version a real chance before you default to new. Habit 8. Omotenashi. Hosting without overspending. Omotenashi is a spirit of hospitality, genuinely anticipating what a guest might need and offering it wholeheartedly, without any expectation of anything in return. It gets translated sometimes as simply Japanese hospitality, but the part that gets lost in translation is that it was never really about spending money. It's about attentiveness, which is a completely different currency. Picture a simple table, nothing elaborate on it, but every small detail already thought through. The drink someone likes already poured before they ask, a blanket already set out for the one guest who's always cold, a quiet awareness of what each specific person in the room might need. That's Omotenashi, and not one part of it required a caterer or a themed backdrop. I used to think hosting playdates or birthday parties meant matching whatever the last mom in the group chat had done. The character-themed everything, the goodie bags nobody remembers by Tuesday, the rented bounce house. I started hosting with real attention instead of real spending. Homemade food that actually tastes good, one simple activity, genuine focus on whether the kids are actually having fun rather than whether the photos will look impressive. It has consistently gotten more real, unprompted. That was so nice comments than the expensive version ever did, and it costs a fraction to pull off. This week, if you're hosting anything at all, plan the attention before you plan the budget. Notice what changes when the guest, not the spectacle, becomes the whole point. Habit 9. Hansei, the Sunday money reflection. Hansei means self-reflection. Specifically, the practice of honestly reviewing what happened without spiraling into shame about it, so that you can actually adjust and improve rather than just repeat the same pattern indefinitely. It's a concept woven through everything from manufacturing to sports to personal growth in Japan, and it applies just as cleanly to a checking account. Picture 5 quiet minutes on a Sunday night, Notebook already open from the Kakeibo habit. No judgment attached, just an honest look back at the week's spending, followed by one small adjustment for the week ahead, not 10 pages of self-criticism. 5 minutes. Information only. I started doing this immediately after the Sunday meal planning session, back to back, so it became one combined ritual instead of 2 separate chores. 2 minutes flipping back through the week's notebook, asking what surprised me. It's caught patterns an app notification never would have flagged on its own, like noticing 3 weeks in a row that I'd spent more on quick stops at the store on the exact same days I'd skipped my Sunday planning session. That's not a coincidence you catch by accident. You catch it by actually looking. This week, give yourself 5 honest minutes on Sunday to look back at the week's spending. No shame, just information you can actually use next week. Habit 10. Homage budget, planning ahead for gift giving. In Japan, it's customary to bring back a small gift, an homage for people back home after any trip. And culturally, the accepted version of this is modest and planned for well in advance. Not a last-minute panic purchase grabbed at an airport gift shop 5 minutes before boarding. The actual lesson here has nothing to do with gifts specifically. It's about planning for spending that is completely predictable in timing, even if it feels irregular, instead of treating it like a surprise attack every single time it shows up. Picture a small envelope or a separate savings line in an app, labeled plainly birthdays and holidays, fed a small amount every single month, all year round, so that when November hits, there's no scramble, no dread, no credit card wince at checkout. I opened a small, separate savings pocket specifically for gifts and holidays, birthdays, teacher gifts, the holiday season, and feed it $25 a month every month, regardless of whether anything's coming up that particular month. By the time December arrives, the money is simply already there, sitting quietly, waiting. No debt required, no dread required. This week, open one separate small savings spot, even if it's only $10 a month to start, specifically for the gift giving that somehow manages to feel like a surprise every single year, despite happening on the exact same calendar every single year. Habit 11. Ichigo Ichie. This moment, once. Ichigo Ichie means one time, one meeting. The idea, rooted in Japanese tea ceremony tradition, that this exact moment with these exact people in this exact configuration will never happen again in quite the same way, no matter how many times you might repeat something that looks similar on the surface. It sounds like a poetry lesson, and honestly, it kind of is one. But it's also a genuinely useful spending filter, and it cuts both ways. On one side, it stops impulse spending driven purely by fear of missing out on things that don't actually matter in 6 months. The trending item, the sale that won't last, the thing everyone else seems to have. On the other side, it gives full, guilt-free permission to spend without a shred of second-guessing on the things that genuinely do matter and genuinely won't come back around. Picture a completely random Tuesday, nothing on the calendar, one of your kids asking out of nowhere if you can go get ice cream. And instead of running the mental math on whether it fits the week's budget, you just say yes because you've already decided in advance that this exact kind of moment is worth protecting on purpose. I keep a small, separate fund specifically for this, with no plan attached to it and no fixed schedule. It just exists quietly. For the day, one of my kids says, "Can we?" Last year, it added up to $340 spent across 4 completely unplanned afternoons, and I don't regret a single dollar of any of them, because none of those 4 afternoons are ever coming back in exactly that form. This week, set aside a small specific amount for one spontaneous yes, and when the moment actually shows up, take it without doing the math first. Trust the fund you already set up to have done the math for you. Habit 12. Kansha. Spending from gratitude, not from lack. Kansha means gratitude, not the greeting card version printed on a mug, but a genuine, repeated daily practice of noticing what's already enough before ever reaching for what isn't. It's the quietest habit on this entire list, and honestly, it might be the one doing the most invisible work underneath all the other 11. Picture that same mom from the very beginning of this video, the one at the potluck, the one who never seems to panic at checkout. The real secret was never a clever system or a hidden income source. It's that she genuinely believes her life already contains enough in it, which means she isn't shopping to fill a hole that, in her own mind, doesn't actually exist. Nearly all the spending that quietly disappears without a trace comes from a feeling of not enough. Not enough time, not enough fun, not enough proof that things are okay. Every single habit on this list works in one way or another by interrupting that feeling before it turns into a transaction. Kansha is simply that interruption, done directly and on purpose, instead of accidentally. Some nights, notebook already closed for the day, I just sit for a minute and name 3 specific things from that day that were already enough before I let myself think about anything I might want. It sounds almost too small to matter. It has quietly changed more in our house than any single budgeting trick I've tried, this one included. This week, before bed each night, name 1 specific thing from that day that was already enough, with absolutely nothing purchased required to make it feel that way. Closing. So that's 12 habits, and if you go back to that mom at the potluck from the very beginning of this video, she was never hiding a bigger paycheck, a secret inheritance, or some system the rest of us weren't told about. She was simply running on a completely different, quieter operating system, one small, almost boring decision at a time, the same 12 decisions you now have sitting in front of you. You don't need all 12 starting tomorrow, pick just one. Start there, this week, and let it actually become boring and automatic before you add a second one. If any part of this helped you, or even just made you feel a little less alone in the parking lot math version of motherhood, hit subscribe. I put these out weekly. No shame, no lifestyle flexing, just what's actually worked in a real house with real kids. And tell me in the comments which one of these 12 you're starting with. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next video.